All right, I want to welcome you to a late special report from Bold Like a Leopard, aka Razor Sharp Reports. And the main topic tonight, obviously, will be limited to a couple of statewide elections in New Jersey and Virginia. So, some people have already popped champagne corks stating that um, Glenn Youngkin is elected as the new governor of Virginia. And I can include that ABC has projected that he's going to win. Okay, so as of right now, it looks like he could pull it out, but for whatever reason, they continue to talk about how there's all this expected vote out there, and I don't think that they'll officially declare the race. Like ABC has declared it over, but you could see people drag this out until tomorrow. And you can see from the results that there's about 85,000 votes at the moment separating Glenn Youngkin and Terry McAuliffe, his Democratic opponent. So I don't really join in with people who celebrate too early. Uh, and in fact, the question I think going forward is, what is the cause for celebration? I think it really depends on who you are, right? There are people, I think, who have moved into sort of this state of mind where it's not enough for simply your party representative to win, right? Your nominee, because party affiliation doesn't necessarily get you results. I live in a very democratic district, both in Congress and in terms of, all the other local officials, and people have been waiting for results for years. I can even tell you, for example, that um, in the Ward 1 of Cleveland, which I drive through nearly every day, I don't work there, but I can tell you that I drive through there. It looks basically like it's been abandoned for decades. Large parts of it. There's a lot of vacant lots. There are industrial yards that clearly have seen better times, and people just keep getting reelected. In fact, I think that their Ward 1 councilman got elected. And the truth is that it's often easier to run as a candidate of change and to promise change every time rather than actually deliver it, because if you actually accomplish something, it doesn't necessarily mean that people will really appreciate you, right? So I want to discuss a little bit about what would victory mean if Glenn Youngkin won. If you're a Republican, I don't consider myself a partisan Republican, because I think the party has certainly disappointed on many occasions, and many of its actual views don't really appeal to me as much, right? Now, in terms of certain core values such as abortion, the Second Amendment, and the rights to privacy and personal property, I think the Republican Party has some good ideas, but doesn't really follow through with them. And then in other respects, where it is very interventionist in terms of foreign policy, uh, it used to be that there were days I'd be like, well, I think this is the worst of the two parties, right? So it really is, I would say, a mixed bag. But here we're talking about a statewide race. So voting for a person for a statewide race in a place like Virginia, or for that matter, in most other states in the union, it doesn't really affect war and peace as much. It's more about local issues. And in that respect, I think that the Democrats are much worse, unfortunately, right? So ideally, okay, those of you watching at home, being a partisan actually doesn't really help you be, um, a well-informed voter. It doesn't help you keep abreast of the real issues that are affecting the society that you're living in, because you're constantly rooting for a team instead of rooting for an outcome, right? So election results don't necessarily mean a win or a loss for the community. It could just be a loss for for the community and a win for the candidate, right? I actually I'm living through a school board race, a very bitter school board race in my community, where the incumbents are basically, and I think the incumbents are going to win, unfortunately, but they've portrayed their opponents as these ideological extremists who are willing to destroy public education in our city. But they're not really promising any real results. Our district has largely deteriorated for the past 4 or 5 decades, and most of what they're promising is to not be Trumpsters, and that, in my opinion, is certainly the mark of a group of charlatans, right? If all you're doing is you're promising people not to be something, then how can they expect anything from you? So with that being said, I think if you're a Democrat today, so let's go to some of the takeaways from today. So there are headlines. I like to use Real Clear Politics. I do notice sometimes though, Real Clear Politics, I would say samples a little bit more on the conservative side than on the liberal side. So if you're if you're sitting out there and you're saying, well, why don't you acknowledge that? Well, I'm fully willing to acknowledge that they don't seem to be completely objective, but they do give a little bit of a selection. And you have some people here, for example, Nicholas Riccardi from the Associated Press is saying takeaways from Tuesday: bad omens for Democrats. So let's read a little bit of that, and then I'll go to some takeaways for Republicans. The off-year elections for governor in Virginia and New Jersey tend to receive outsized attention, and the results are mined for deeper meaning about what they portend for the midterm elections the following year that will determine which party controls Congress. Here are some key takeaways from Tuesday's elections. Democrats see their worst fears in Virginia. Democrats' worst fears are that they're on course for a 2010 like drubbing in the midterm elections, and that they can't use the specter of former President Donald Trump to stop it. Those fears got a lot stronger after Republican Glenn Youngkin won the governor's race in Virginia. So I think it's it's very telling to see this wording. Okay, the Associated Press is already um, writing as if Youngkin has won the race. Right now, does that mean he's won the race? I don't know, because due to the results from last year, okay, and I'm not trying to do this in order to rain on anybody's parade if they're a Youngkin supporter. I'm not trying to do this in order to give false hope if you are a McAuliffe supporter. I think having an advantage like he has at the moment is, you can't just say that this race is literally up in the air. Like Glenn Youngkin has a significant lead with with the race in a very, very late stage of the ballot counting. I was actually joking tonight. I was at a event tonight, um, celebrating a young couple's recent marriage, and people were literally like chattering all about Virginia. Now we live in Ohio, and normally nobody cares about Virginia. Some people care about New Jersey. I don't know why, but I'm just kidding. There's a few people who have moved here from New Jersey and New York, so a lot of these people are excited because many people, I live in the Jewish community. They've fled blue states. They don't believe in high taxation. They believe in conservative family values, at least. Um, it might not be the same stream of conservatism as me or you, but um, there were a lot of them were all abuzz about how Glenn Youngkin is, he's really. In fact, my one of my best friends was basically ecstatic. And this was a few hours ago when the race hadn't been really decided yet. But you have to realize that um, it's a bad showing for the Democrats. Okay, and he'll go into it a little bit. President Joe Biden won Virginia by 10 percentage points just a year ago, and if Democrats cannot generate more enthusiasm than their gubernatorial candidate Terry McAuliffe did, they'll likely be swept out of power in Congress. In Virginia, governors are limited to a single term and elections are held in odd numbered years, making it the go to gauge of voter sentiment before midterms. It usually is a warning for the party in power in Washington, and this year it was no different. Okay? So these are this is plainly political speak, um, because okay, so we should be back. We should be back. I'm sorry. Now, for those of you watching on replay, this was a live stream. Anyway, so in Virginia, we read this paragraph. McAuliffe, elected Virginia governor in 2013, was unable to excite voters amid significant headwinds facing Democrats, including Biden's drooping poll numbers, the congressional stalemate over the president's economic agenda, and the persistence of the pandemic. Democrats have only a 5-vote margin in the House and a single vote margin in the Senate. Historically, the party in power almost always loses seats in Congress. But if 2022 nationally is anything like Virginia 2021, Democrats will lose a lot more than normal. Youngkin shows the GOP the way. So he's going into the Republican points now. Diversifying states with a large share of college graduates like Virginia have been an unsolvable puzzle for the GOP during the political era dominated by former President Donald Trump. But Youngkin seems to have cracked the code. A former private equity executive, Youngkin presented himself as a non-threatening suburban dad in a fleece vest. He embraced Trump just enough to win the GOP primary and rev up the party base, but was also able to target more moderate voters by talking about fiscal management and investing in schools and campaigning without the former president at his side. According to AP Votecast, a survey of voters, it paid off. While a majority of voters held an unfavorable view of Trump, almost half had a favorable view of Youngkin. Look for more Republicans next year to try to model themselves after Youngkin in swing areas, refusing to disavow Trump, but not hugging him too closely, and tailoring their messages to both the former president's most hardcore voters and persuadable for suburbanites. So this is an interesting strategy. I don't always agree with something like this. Look, I think you need candidates who have core values. If they're and they don't have to be my core values, but let's say if you're a Trump supporter, you can't have a candidate who isn't willing to tackle immigration, at least as a state official or a municipal official. They have to be someone who's willing to take a risk and try to enforce immigration laws. I think some of the Republican officials near, in the border states, they have mixed records on that. Even Greg Abbott has a very mixed record on that. Some people from Texas might tell you that they're not satisfied with his action on the border, but other people are like, well, he's putting Texas National Guard there. He's putting the Texas Rangers on the border. So, sometimes you have to realize that there's different constituencies to market to. And that's what they're saying about Glenn Youngkin. But is it the right thing to do? Um, I don't always think so. So at the moment, it looks like it is. Let me see. Yeah, it's still about 88,000 vote difference. So, and that's 97% of the vote reporting. So, yeah, I don't think that McAuliffe is going to be able to make up that gap, right? It would have to be like once the race gets to such a stage, you have to begin thinking, well, what's it's going to be like? They're just going to dump only McAuliffe votes in there, or um, Youngkin's signature issue was an unexpected one: education. He prevailed on the issue by both pledging to boost education funding and hammering public schools on hot button social issues like race and transgender rights. He said he would ban the teaching of critical race theory in Virginia classrooms, even though it is not a part of the secondary school curriculum. So this is a biased reading of the issue by the AP. The fact is that critical race theory is not necessarily limited to it's not limited to some sort of definitional, um, narrow view of the topic, right? Critical race theory, in its strict definition, is this legal educational, um, discipline that I think was developed in the 80s by Derek Bell, who was a law professor. But it's been applied to many other things. So maybe they don't call it critical race theory. In some schools, they now call it social emotional learning, I believe it is, or something. And in many cases, I think of these as very destructive elements of our educational system. So they don't know first of all, either they don't know what they're talking about, but second of all, they might just be deliberately obtuse. Oh, well, we don't even know where this is being practiced. So the focus comes after lengthy school closures during the pandemic infuriated some traditionally Democratic voting groups and conservatives targeted school board races nationwide after masking rules and teaching racial justice issues. In Virginia, 14% of voters listed education as a top issue, and about 7 of 10 of those voted for Youngkin. McAuliffe didn't help himself when, during a debate, he said, "I don't believe parents should be telling schools what they should teach," providing Youngkin a pivotal opening to hammer his opponent. And I'm very surprised that that resonated so strongly at the time, because I thought eventually it would fade, but it just it seemed to get much worse for McAuliffe. Liberal voting laws aren't bad for the GOP. Democrats took control of all parts of Virginia's government in 2019 and steadily started liberalizing the state's voting laws. They made mail voting accessible to all and required a 45-day window for early voting, among the largest in the country. This year, they passed a Voting Rights Act that made it easier to sue for blocking ballot access. Trump in 2020 attacked efforts to expand ballot access during the pandemic, spreading baseless claims of fraud. So this goes more into disputes over election law. Republican-controlled states have rushed to tighten voting laws, cutting early voting hours, restricting mail balloting, and arguing that liberalizing elections invites fraud and helps Democrats. The latter claim contradicts repeated studies that have found that mail voting does not favor either political party. So it doesn't really cite any of those studies. It just relies on your faith to believe it, right? And this is what I'm saying, that the media, they do a disservice to the voters, and not just to Republican voters, but to voters, period, Democratic voters as well, when it says that there have been repeated studies. Well, you're not even talking about the studies. You're just saying that they exist, right? So instead of going into like one of the problems with the news is that often they will tease a topic just enough without actually revealing anything about it. They will not actually give you any real information. They'll just hint at it because they assume that you're going to believe it because it's the AP, or it's Reuters, or it is Bloomberg, or whatever. Now, Virginia's election is another example of how liberal voting laws don't hurt conservatives. So, I mean, okay, well, then doesn't that mean that the Democrats are so terrible that even under their own very loose voting laws, they can't win this election in a in a very liberal state? The other big governor's race Tuesday was in New Jersey. The polls closed an hour later in the state, where Democratic Governor Phil Murphy was favored in his race against Republican Jack Ciattarelli. The race is too early to call. Democrats are looking to the Garden State for hopeful signs, but they may not find many, as the race was tighter than some expected. So as of right now, um, I want to. So I'm going to switch right now to. Let's see here. Um, so this is New Jersey, and there's still quite a few votes left.
I'm running against an extreme candidate who would undo.
So that's Governor Murphy. So Jack Ciattarelli is obviously he's going to win Sussex County. He's going to win Morristown County. Bergen is largely for Phil Murphy. Hudson County, which is where I believe Newark is, and most of the more populated areas in North Jersey, is heavily for Murphy. Essex County is heavily for Murphy. So he's winning with a healthy amount of votes in many of these districts, but sorry, these counties. But um, the more you get into some of the more um, rural counties of New Jersey, and people forget that they exist. Um, Murphy's just not doing very well. Mercer County, he is still doing very well, and this is Camden County, which is where I think that's where Trenton, the capital, is. So Murphy is winning there, but in southern New Jersey, he's doing very poorly, right? Atlanta County, Ocean County. I've been to Ocean County. Believe it, so I am not a fan of the state of New Jersey, uh, but we did find on a visit there I think it was in May that some of it's actually enjoyable. We went to the Jersey Shore. Um, and no, we didn't go to a T-shirt store, but very pleasant cafe there. Nice people. But I think it was a touristy destination. Other than that, I'm not really a big fan of the state. So um, we could very well see Jack Cottarelli win this race. Now, right now, as of this moment, he's only ahead by 4,000 votes. But look, for the Democrats to be eking out a victory in New Jersey, and for them to also be, projected to lose in Virginia, you have to start to wonder.
Glenn Youngkin is closing his event.
So that this is how they always started. They start with a Democratic candidate declaring some sort of fear message against his opponent. So yeah, as of right now, Youngkin is ahead by 86,000. So, um, 1 second. Let me move myself over here. Uh, sorry, maybe I gave you like a little bit of a collage effect there. Um, so I think that this is actually so. I'm going to go through my impressions of what's going on and what it pretends for the Democrats, what it pretends for the Republicans. Then I'm going to wrap up because it's actually pretty late over here. But if you're a Democrat and you're watching this race, I would say that, and especially if you're a Democratic official, what you need to do is basically break away from the Biden agenda, form basically some sort of local, very separate agenda from everything the party is doing on the national level. I don't even want to go into specifics because there's no way. First of all, if you're a Democrat and you're trying to win basically on the same um, ticket as a Republican, it doesn't always work because, as some people in the progressive camp say, why would people vote for, why would people vote for something that's not even the genuine article? Like Democrats will often talk about, oh, we're the party of responsible spending, we're the party of, safe schools and safe streets and everything, talking about their version of law and order. And in reality, I think many people who are sticklers for those issues, they read through the rhetoric and they say, well, we don't think he's very sincere. So they end up voting for the Republican because they don't think that the Democrat is sincerely going to fulfill that message. So, with that being said, um, the Democrats who intend to win in 2022, I think that they have to take away from this that you can't be very closely identified with the National Party. And Terry McAuliffe is one of the most closely aligned people with the National Party. He was the DNC chairman, I think, in the early 2000s when Gore was running for president. So take that for what it's worth. Um, or actually, I think when Kerry was running. Yeah, I think he was DNC chair after Gore lost in 2000, or if you don't want to believe that Gore lost, then after the election in 2000. Now, if you're a Republican trying to take takeaways from this race, I don't think that you can necessarily be too happy. You have to see how Glenn Youngkin is going to govern. You have to see how other politicians are going to react to this. I think that initially speaking, this will be very encouraging because you will be seeing people saying, "Well, a lot of these races that we thought are out of our reach, they're now winnable." Even Real Clear Politics is now projecting that Glenn Youngkin is going to be the governor. So it's not a good situation for Terry McAuliffe that multiple places are just they're writing him off. He's done. Um, And there's people, Jim Newell from Slate is a very liberal guy. Um, and he's saying Joe Biden is dragging Democrats down, right? So he's saying political pundits have drafted their narrative options for late Tuesday night. All that it's need is an election result to determine which one to run with. In one scenario, Virginia elects Democrat Terry McAuliffe to his second non-consecutive term as governor, defying a late charge from his well-financed opponent, Republican Glenn Youngkin. In this case, McAuliffe's strategy of yoking Youngkin to Donald Trump will be remembered as a stroke of genius. The midterms will be fine for Democrats. In the other, Glenn Youngkin rides his late surge across the finish line and bests McAuliffe. Goes down as a stupid idiot for focusing so much on has-been Donald Trump. The midterms will be a disaster. The outcome of the Virginia gubernatorial election is of the utmost importance for residents of Virginia and what direction they want to take their state. For the much broader universe of those looking to Virginia for answers to second order questions, though, those answers are already out there. Democrats have a problem. If the polling is anywhere close to accurate, no one is going to win the race running away. Either Youngkin or McAuliffe could win by a couple of points. That's why, regardless of which side the coin flip lands, the Democrats already have enough information to know they're in a difficult position heading into the midterm election season. President Biden won Virginia by 10 percentage points in 2020. If Youngkin wins by 2 points, Democrats would be 12 points off their 2020 race. If McAuliffe wins by 2, Democrats would be 8 points off. And while that 2-point McAuliffe victory would be useful in the short term for national Democrats, it would stave off that second extremely annoying hair on fire narrative from overtaking the news as they're trying to wrap up their legislative agenda. It would hardly show that the American people are more in love with the Democratic Party than ever. Democrats would be well behind their 2020 pace, one that netted them a majority of only a few seats in the House of Representatives. The Democratic National Party, in damage control mode, may try to write off the result, speaking anonymously, of course, as an issue of McAuliffe just being a bad apple. And sure, the longtime party operative, insider, and fundraiser organizer is not exactly the heir to Barack Obama. He committed a gaffe in one debate that the Youngkin campaign has successfully hung its hat on for the final month of the campaign. So then he keeps going on, and it's actually, I think this is, as a leftist critique of the campaign, I don't think that this is dumb, but um, moving beyond this, Republicans in 2022, um, I think that first of all, a lot of the work is already it's falling into place. You see, if you watch yesterday's stream slash podcast, Adam Kinzinger is gone. So one of the main anti-Trump Republicans is out. And with Youngkin getting elected, and he's not an anti-Trump Republican, but he's also not a big Trumper. Um, you see this narrative that the Republican Party is irredeemably extremist. It doesn't really hold water, right? So you have a person like Youngkin. He might not be my cup of tea. He might not be, as my cup of tea as a person who is a right-leaning libertarian. It might not be your cup of tea if you're a liberal, but the fact is he was able to win in Virginia as of right now, and the Democrats can't really pin Trump on him because he isn't exactly some sort of demagogue. He's sort of running on very lukewarm and kitchen table issues. And for people who have looked at Virginia as this developing incubator for radical policies, and there are people like that, this is a huge setback for Democrats. They lost a lot of, and this is something that isn't really discussed on the national stage because it doesn't really concern people. But they lost a number of legislative seats in Virginia too, in the state legislature, the House of Delegates. So all of those factors, they combine, I think, to build a lot of enthusiasm for Republicans in that state. There will be, by the way, a Senate seat up for grabs in Virginia in 2022. I think it's the seat occupied by Mark Warner. And this race, the governor's race, it does put that into play somewhat. and it causes possibly a dip in enthusiasm among Democratic candidates. So all of those things, they work to motivate Republicans, right? And I'm not saying this as a Republican because I'm not one. I don't really like to contribute to the party, but certainly I think that the Democratic Party has gone out of control, and um, the sad truth is that the Republicans present um, a little bit of relief from the Democratic Party and its corruption and its lack of accountability and its constant crusades against what it considers extremism. So I think some people who are watching this race, who may be very cynical and black-pilled about the state of America in 2021 because of what happened in 2020, they may be walking back from the ledge and saying, you know what, in 2022 we really should vote because look, Glunkin, Youngkin got into office, and many people wrote him off at first, but he was able to do it. Um, and he wasn't dependent on the media or on the other hand, Donald Trump to carry him across the finish line. I think he just ran a better campaign. But that's it for now. I want to thank you. I want you to please like, share, and subscribe. Also, please subscribe to me on all of the other links that I have below. So that would be on Odyssey, BitChute, Gab, Minds.com, and Rumble. I think the Rumble link should be below, but it's not. So sorry about that. But look me up on Rumble, and you can chip in through Subscribestar. You can follow me on Telegram if you want to just message me. And you can also find me on what's the other one? Oh, find my newsletter. The newsletter is the first link, and I am actually due to write a newsletter at some point this month because I haven't written one for a long time. Anyway, peace, have a good night, and take care.